Hi everyone, this is Leonora. Today I want to talk to you about the anatomy of trauma. So just to kind of put that in the context of the way that I work with trauma is that when I'm speaking about trauma, I'm referencing it as part of an energy field, which I call your field of awareness. Yeah. And that information, so the trauma I call information, is unconscious and is available and accessible to you within the field of awareness. And the way that we do that is through the direct experience of the field of awareness and the felt sense. So you can think of this as kind of closing your eyes and feeling within your field. So many of us don't live in connection to our field of awareness because there are things within it that we're disconnected from. And really the gift of reconnecting to trauma is the reclamation of both the true self and the power that is lost due to self-awareness and what happens to the system when we get traumatized. So just as a very vague definition of trauma, trauma is when something happens to us when we're in an experience that overwhelms the nervous system. And what that means is that we kind of can't digest it, and it does affect digestion. So often digestion issues are very related to unresolved trauma. So, you know, when we can't be present fully during the experience of something traumatic, we kind of split off from ourself, and in that splitting off we create a false self or an adaptation that has a relationship with that experience that's within us, and that experience gets pushed into being unconscious. In other words, we've left it. And the task of healing trauma is a process of integration and reclamation. So it's the returning through the felt sense experience of what's in your field to, you know, in a deep way, to the origin of it, which is when you left yourself. So in the way that I speak about trauma is that actually there is only one trauma and one origin. And that origin is the leaving of your true self. So let me show you a diagram that's going to help, you know, give some perspective and understanding to what I'm saying. So there's many ways to talk about trauma, and by no means is this slide fully comprehensive about all the things that you might want to understand about trauma, and then also how you might want to, you know, learn to heal yourself from this unresolved past, especially in challenging times. The most important thing about the unresolved past is that it's energetically available to us through this field of awareness. And if we are disconnected from it and not in touch with it, we're actually seeing through these experiences which have shaped us. And what we see and perceive in the world is related, you know, how we perceive and how we react to the world is related to this unresolved material. So in the deepest way, the reclamation of this material individually and collectively is how we go about creating a new world, because we really actually have the power within us to do that. So just I want to bring your attention to this diagram and the little piece on the left side of your screen with the concentric circles around it. You might experience this in the field of view. This is a sort of bird's eye view of what a traumatic imprint might look / feel like. So, you know, it can be dense. It can feel tight and dense. There may be tension in the body where it is. And as you begin to explore it with a good attitude, openness, and interest and curiosity with it, it will change. And so what's really valuable here is that you can reverse the separation that you have from what's unconscious in your field to making it conscious purely by your intention to feel it and to connect with it in a loving way. So I liken this to the journey of discovery, but because we're accessing something that has unconscious information, we're on a discovery journey. It's something by default that is something we don't know about. And so, you know, there's a sort of adventurous spirit that's required in being willing to learn something new, being courageous enough to take the time to find out. Yeah, and the value in doing this is the absolute transformation of what limits you and what beliefs you have, to the point of changing your life. So to kind of look at the anatomy of this unconscious material that's in your field is it becomes conscious when you connect with it directly and when you explore it. So there are levels and layers to this field. But one thing that can happen is as you enter that imprint, that traumatic imprint that's in your field, is it starts to change. It starts to respond and become conscious. And so remaining connected in a dynamic way of observing it is very important. And this is something the mind doesn't like to do. The mind's orientation is more about, I've seen it, I know it, I understand it, I'm done with it. Yeah. And in that orientation, it never discovers what is hidden from the mind, what is unconscious to the mind. So my invitation is when you enter the field of awareness and you find a trauma imprint or a density in your body, is to seep into it and embed your awareness there so that you're in a direct communication, like you've established a link of communication between that energy and yourself. So as you explore this field and you start to look at it, it starts to change. And if you explore its location and its size and its shape in relation to your body and your field of awareness, you might notice that there are different qualities of density, like it has a center which may be more dense, and it also starts to diffuse as you look for the edge of it. So this is very valuable because an openness to experience it allows you to receive more information than an attitude of fixing or trying to heal or trying to get rid of. Okay, so we're using the language of the soul, or the language of love, which is a natural alchemy. Is that when I approach something in a loving way, it will share with me its message. So as you do this, you're making what's unconscious conscious, and as you do that, you're actually changing your relationship with yourself, and you are also changing how you see the world. So I'd like to move to the diagram on the right-hand side, which kind of puts a different view. This is a view, instead of looking as a bird's eye view, is looking through time into the origin of this trauma. So trauma is cumulative. So the experience that you might find in your field of awareness right now has its roots in the past. So as you enter that experience, you might find yourself recalling memories, or even sometimes people get images, which are memories of past experiences. What's really important is not to leave the connection with the felt sense at this point, because the mind again wants to know, and when it finds an image, it thinks it's done. It thinks it got the message. But what we're actually doing is we're working with trauma in a different way. We're working with whatever your capacity is to enter the field, which improves as you do it. It's a practice, to embed in a dynamic engagement with this experience in your field, to find its deepest root. And the deepest root of all experiences, of all things, is the absolute. Some people might refer to that as God, or the unmanifest, or the undifferentiated, or the mystery, the unknowable, the Tao, the ground of being. It has many, many names, but none of it really do justice in describing it. But we can actually have a direct experience of it. We may just fall into it, or we may invoke it. And I have other ways of working with trauma that I talk about in other places here on the internet. But for now, there is incredible value in just understanding that the trauma that you're experiencing right now in this moment has a lot of history in time and has been shaped over time. And so it's a little bit like we're peeling back through time, through these experiences, to feel them. And through feeling them, they integrate back to the origin. And the origin is true self. So I want to say about trauma is, because we're looking at trauma in the context of time, that there's an element of time that we're consciously aware of, but there's a lot of trauma that actually has its roots in pre-conscious experiences. And these are things like when you're an infant, or your birth experience, your womb experience, your conception experience. Those are the ones that your physical body has journeyed through. And those are not known to the mind, but they are known in the somatic experience of your field. And they're shaping your field and clouding how you perceive the world. And the roots of those experiences can go even deeper than you, because you're a product of your parents, and whatever shaped and co-created them, their traumatic past, is also, through the conception of you, transmitted into you. And this can go back many, many generations. So we are really healing our ancestors. And even though it might be hard to understand that and to know what is that experience in the field, as we do this work, we become more and more skilled at reading and understanding how the energy of the soul, or the alchemy of love, I like to call it, how that works. And you get shown. So the idea here of entering this string of events is to pass through them in such a way that they integrate. And that requires a direct experience. Now, some of these densities in the body are basically unexpressed emotions that have kind of congealed and been held down and didn't get to express. And so once you start feeling, for example, the emotional energy that's contained within these experiences, you start to feel the movement of energy, because emotion is energy in motion. And energy in motion is a release, and it removes some of the density that you might find in your body. So if it's been there a long time, it starts to create dis-ease in the body and inhibits the body's ability to function in an optimal way. So as we're entering this field of awareness and entering these experiences, we're making what was unconscious conscious. And in doing that, we're actually collapsing time back to the present moment. The present moment is really a way of understanding this eternal presence, this absolute, which lives beyond time, but is here right now. And it's kind of impossible to talk about, but I share it with you because you'll bump into these things as you do this kind of work. What is really valuable here is that kind of all traumas lead to Rome. All traumas, when followed fully through the direct experience of the field, will lead you back to your true self. Another piece that's important, and I've depicted it in this diagram with the all-seeing eye in the white bubble, is that there is a perceiver who is in resistance, let's just say has a relationship with the trauma. And the nature of that perceiver is he or she is unconscious in regard to the trauma and has this kind of a gap between your perceiver and what it perceives. And I call that the event horizon. And what's in that gap is all the material or the information that hasn't been integrated. And your perceiver, it's a little bit like when you have a trauma, we become overwhelmed. And in that overwhelm, we separate from our true self. And in that separation, we are actually creating a false self. It's an adaptive self. It's valuable. It's sometimes referred to as an ego self, but it's basically mental structures that we look through that shape how we experience the world. You know, so you might be experiencing things in world events right now with a proclivity to see them in a certain way because of how you were shaped. Generally, this sense of self, this identity or ego self, is in an existential crisis. It doesn't want to die. It believes that it's real, and it believes that it exists, and it's in a relativistic, in other words, separate experience from itself, the field of awareness, and from other. And so what it's actually doing is projecting the unresolved out into the world. We are all co-creating unconsciously the world. Yes, the world out there and how we perceive it. And the task, rather than fixing the world, though some of that can be valuable, is really to remove the unconscious material, our individual karma and collective karma, from our field of awareness, so that we can, one, see clearly, and two, that we can consciously manifest the world that we want to have. So working with perception is about working with resistance, because this perception or this sense of I that is kind of an imposter that resides as me, is engaged in survival. Why? Because when this overwhelming experience happened, it felt like a death. It was a death in some way of the self that we knew. And we've become a self now that needs to protect. Yeah, we innately feel unsafe. And all lack of safety is totally 100% linked to being separate from your true self. That safety is inherent in your true self. So, you know, understanding this is valuable to a point, and it's only meant to be offered to you as inspiration for possibilities. But the work still needs to be done, and actually doing the work of meeting these experiences and noticing your resistance to them. And more than that, cultivating what I call heart-centered sovereignty are all fundamental to this healing ourselves and integrating back to what I like to think of as the divine and original blueprint of human. Thanks for listening. If you like my content, please like and share, and please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.